Unlocking French shopping, the mystery of nouns and adjectives. So, if you've ever tried picking up a little French, you've probably hit a wall when it comes to shopping vocabulary. Let's jump right into this explainer and crack the code on exactly why that happens.
Why does the French word for a keep changing? And why do the adjectives seem backward? These are the two big mysteries we're tackling today. First, why on earth does the simple word for a or an keep changing its spelling and pronunciation? And second, why do the describing words, the adjectives, feel like they're just completely backward compared to English? I promise you, it's not random. It's actually a highly structured system that addresses the exact roadblocks we face as English speakers.
Let's look at this phrase for a hypothetical shopping trip. Bonjour, je cherche un manteau. Hello, I am looking for a coat. Now, I want you to notice that tiny little word right in the middle, spelled UN. It has this slightly nasal pronunciation, In this context, directly before the word for coat, manteau, it translates to a. Lock that into your memory for a second. Now imagine you're still in that same store, but this time you say, Excuse-moi, je voudrais une robe et une chemise. Excuse me, I would like a dress and a shirt. Look what just happened. We are no longer using un. The word for a has magically gained an e on the end, becoming une, with a really distinct u sound. Une robe, a dress, and une chemise, a shirt. So what's going on here? Why did the coat get un, but the dress and the shirt get une? Grammatical gender. In French, all nouns have a gender, either masculine or feminine. This applies even to objects. You'll need to memorize the gender of each noun. This right here is the single most important foundation for speaking French correctly. In French, absolutely every single noun has a gender assigned to it. It's either masculine or it's feminine. And yes, this applies to literally everything, even inanimate objects like clothing. A coat isn't just a coat, it's grammatically masculine. A dress is grammatically feminine. One of the absolute biggest pitfalls for beginners is just memorizing the object itself. You really have to memorize its gender right alongside it. We can actually see this directly in the Unit 5 guidebook, showing grammar tips and key phrases. These foundational rules are pulled right from our source material. You can see the key phrases we just went over at the top, and right underneath, there are clear grammar tips breaking down grammatical gender, indefinite articles, and adjective agreement. Let's pull that article chart out to really make it crystal clear. Here's the breakdown. Masculine gets un, and feminine gets une. If you want to say a or an in French, you always have to look at the noun that comes right after it. If that noun is masculine, you use un. If it's feminine, you go with une. It's a strict binary system, no exceptions. Let's practice applying this to some specific clothing vocabulary. Let's look at examples using a. We've got un chapeau for a hat, un manteau for a coat, and un pull for a sweater. Because chapeau, manteau, and pull are all masculine nouns, they natively pair with the masculine article un. A pro tip here, don't just learn the word chapeau in isolation. Learn the collocation un chapeau. Saying them together wires that gender directly into your brain. Now let's contrast that with examples using une. We have in robe for a dress and in chemise for a shirt. Notice the distinct phonetic difference here. The masculine un has a short, nasal sound, while the feminine une has a rounded, distinct u sound, followed by a soft n. Whenever you're dealing with these two items of clothing, you are operating entirely under feminine grammatical rules. Let's see this in a natural scenario. Un pull ou un manteau, a sweater or a coat. Imagine you're holding up two items in a boutique, trying to decide between them. Because both items are masculine, the sentence flows really nicely with that repeated un. But here's where it gets interesting. Knowing the gender of the noun doesn't just dictate the word for a, it fundamentally changes how you describe the clothing itself. Let's talk about adjectives. Adjectives must match the gender of the noun they describe. Most adjectives add an e for feminine nouns. This brings us to our next major grammatical hurdle, adjective agreement. In English, a black coat and a black dress use the exact same word, black. Simple, right? But in French, adjectives are basically shapeshifters. They have to match the gender of the noun they're describing. The general rule of thumb is that most adjectives add the letter E when they describe a feminine noun. Let's look at masculine un pull noir versus feminine une robe noire. On the top, we've got our masculine sweater, un pull noir, a black sweater. The word for black is spelled N-O-I-R. But look at the bottom. With our feminine dress, we say une robe noire.
We literally had to slap an e onto the end to make it grammatically agree with the feminine noun robe. The spelling physically changes to show that matching relationship.
Let's verify this pattern with the color green. Masculine is un manteau vert and feminine is une chemise verte. For the masculine coat, it's un manteau vert, spelled V-E-R-T. But for the feminine shirt, it becomes une chemise verte. And here's an absolutely crucial point for your spoken French. Adding this E often completely changes the pronunciation. Vert has a silent T at the end, but in the feminine verte, that added E forces you to pronounce the T. Un manteau vert, une chemise verte. It's fascinating because the grammar rule literally changes the sound of the sentence. A green hat. French, un chapeau vert. Now for the final piece of the puzzle. Where do these adjectives actually go? In English, the adjective comes first, but in French, it translates literally to a hat green. A super common trap for beginners is putting the color first out of habit. In French, adjectives typically come after the noun they're describing. You name the object first, and then you paint it with the describing word. Je cherche un chapeau vert. I am looking for a green hat. Let's bring everything we've just learned together into this one complete sentence. Think about how much linguistic heavy lifting is actually happening here. You know to use un because chapeau is masculine. Use the base form of vert to agree with the masculine hat. And you place vert after chapeau because of the placement rules. When you say this, you aren't just reciting a phrase. You are actively building it using French logic. When you learn a new French object, will you remember to memorize its gender too? The mystery of the changing a and the backward adjectives is entirely solved by understanding grammatical gender and adjective agreement. But, understanding the rule is really only step one. The real challenge is building the habit. So the next time you learn a new French word, whether it's clothing, food, or furniture, will you commit to memorizing its gender right from the start? Because as we've seen today, that tiny detail is the master key to unlocking the rest of the language. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.